and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Good to go.
All right, let's do it. Welcome, everyone. My name is Will Moss. I am the CEO of HBCU Connect, and I am super excited to be presenting this evening the Microsoft Azure Data Team, some members of the team that have graciously volunteered their time to share their experiences, to talk a little bit about who they are, their path to Microsoft, what they currently do on the specific teams, for us to dive in a little bit into the opportunities that are available on the Microsoft Azure Data Team as well, and to talk a little bit about the culture, the background, and experiences of our panelists and of Microsoft as a company and Azure Data Team. So welcome, everyone. Now, what I like to do at the beginning of the event is I like to do some quick housekeeping. Like I said, if you all would like to leverage the chat during the event, you are highly encouraged to use the chat to ask questions, to introduce yourself. A lot of times it's great for you all as participants to drop your LinkedIn profile. So if you want to grab your link to your LinkedIn profile and drop that in the chat, it'd be a great way for you all not only to network with each other, but also to network with the Microsoft team members that are here representing the company, and take advantage of this opportunity for this event being a live event, right? So I don't want you to feel like you're just watching a video. You are taking part in a live event. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions during our panel discussion, where I will read off your questions. So you can drop your questions in the chat. I'll read off those questions to our team of panelists that, like I said, have volunteered their time to help us out today. So I'll be pulling in your questions from the chat. But then also, after each of our presenters from the Microsoft team speak, you may have specific questions for that team member after they introduce themselves. So I would encourage you to ask questions at that point in time as well. And I'm going to also encourage the Microsoft team members that are here to engage with our candidates in the chat and answer questions if you're not currently speaking, so that we can make this a highly engaging, worthwhile experience for everyone. So thank you all for joining us on time and early. Appreciate it. So let's jump right into our agenda. So I want to run down and set expectations for the agenda this evening so you all know what we're going to cover and what's going to happen. First, I'm going to give a brief 2 to 3 minute welcome from myself, and give you a little background information, and also set expectations for you as candidates around this event. Then I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker, Brian Jackson, who's a principal software engineering manager within Microsoft. After our keynote presentation, I'm going to introduce you to each of the panelists or team members, like I said, that have volunteered their time to share their experiences, their path to Microsoft, what they do at Microsoft, so you all can get a better idea of some of the folks on the team and their background, and how your background might be similar to their background, and things that they like about working at Microsoft, or things that they're currently doing on the Azure Data Team, so that you can basically see yourself in that position, so that you can ask questions as you get prepared or excited for the interview opportunities that will come for some of you after this event. All right, so I'll introduce each of our panelists, then we'll start our panel discussions. I'll take down my slides. We'll focus on the video feed from all of the Microsoft team members that are here, and hear from each of them as they answer some of the questions that I prepared on your behalf as an advocate to you as candidates to get to know Microsoft better. Then I'm going to invite you all during that panel discussion to drop questions in the chat, so that I can kind of keep an eye on the chat, pull some of your questions, and ask those questions to the Microsoft team live and direct. All right, so I'm looking forward to that. So you guys, if you have questions for that panel discussion, make sure you save them so that you can put them in the chat for me to read off to the team. And then after that panel discussion and live Q&A, we've had a chance to kind of answer some of your questions, then we're going to talk about next steps, which in the process is pretty simple. So I want you to take notes during this engagement, especially around, if you have questions around things that you need to make sure to bring out in your background and put those things in your resume and those experiences that you have that align with some of the opportunities that the Microsoft Azure Data Team has. All right, so definitely take notes, definitely brush up that resume so that you can send us an updated version if we don't have the latest and greatest. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Like what I like to do, like I said, introduce myself. If this is your first HBCU Connect event, welcome. If it's a repeat event for you, welcome back. For those of you, that have never been to one of our events, the purpose of these events are not just, a branding opportunity for you to learn more about Microsoft or the hiring organization. These events are meant for people to get hired. We want you to come to the events. We want you to ask questions. We want you to get us your latest and greatest resume. We want to share your resume with the Microsoft team members or the hiring organization so that they can review those resumes and then invite folks in that are a fit for those opportunities for interviews. And then the hope is that as many of you get hired as possible. Now, if you're familiar with us or you're not familiar with us, we've done plenty of these events in the past, and lots of people have been hired from these events. We've been doing this for the last 8 or 9 years. Primarily, we were doing these events offline, in different parts of the country, from Seattle down to California, to Texas, across to Georgia, up the East Coast, to Maryland, DC, North Carolina, all the way up to New York. We've hosted events in partnership with Microsoft, and lots of people have been hired from those events. But due to COVID, kudos to Microsoft. Instead of canceling these recruitment events, they decided to leverage Microsoft Teams and host the events online and continue to consume and hire talent. So that's what the opportunity is for you here today, is to learn, to prepare, to ask questions, and to hopefully land an interview to be hired at Microsoft. All right, so that's all. I know you all are here for the main event, and that is for me to introduce you to the team members at Microsoft. So let me start with our keynote speaker, who is Brian Jackson, Principal Software Engineering Manager there at Microsoft. So Brian, if you're ready.
Yep, I'm ready. So I'm going to go ahead and start presenting on my side.
Perfect.
All right. So hello, everyone. I'm happy to be presenting to you. I'm Brian Jackson. This little screen out of my way. So just a couple of things about me, and then we'll talk a little bit about my background. So as he said, I'm currently a principal software engineering manager in our Azure data team. I lead a group that works on something that we call the backplane, which supports large numbers of databases. I'll get into that in a little more detail later. I've had a number of roles within Microsoft. So I started at Microsoft in 2006. So I've been here a little over 16 years now. Before Microsoft, I started in the Air Force and had some roles there. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that story. I think overall my story is a bit atypical. But I think that's really important. I know this is an HBCU event, and while I didn't go to an HBCU personally, my wife did. So she said, "Hey, represent for Clark Atlanta for me." So I'm doing that. All right. So how did I get to Microsoft? So through the magic of Street View, this is my house that I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. So not a super huge house, but it was home for a long time. And growing up in Detroit through the 80s, the late 70s, early 80s, Detroit changed a lot. Not always the safest place in the country to be. But I had really great parents who made sure I had a lot of opportunities. So I was interested in computers, but I was also interested in other things like engineering, specifically aeronautical engineering and that type of stuff. But it was tough. There were a number of things that you might guess have happened in Detroit, and it's not necessarily a place that I find many others in tech are, "Hey, I'm from Detroit." You just don't see it all that often, but it does happen. And I think what I want to leave you with as part of this part of my history is that, Microsoft has people from everywhere and in all kinds of backgrounds. People say, "Oh, you're from Detroit, so is that Livonia? Is that Novi?" Or you list any suburb that exists. And no, I was from the actual city. Uh, so one of the interesting things about Detroit is that there are some good schools, and then there are some schools that are not as good. I definitely wanted to be on that path where I could get to college and work in the industry and that type of thing. And so this was an important milestone for me. This is a picture of Renaissance High School. So there, at the time, were three magnet schools, and this was one of them. And you had to test to get in. So each year there would be around 2,000 people who apply, and they only accept 200. And if I didn't get into this school, my neighborhood school was not all that good. So, you know, it's your motivation is really important. And I think that's carried throughout my career. You know, when I got to this point, I'm 13 years old, and I'm like, okay, this test is going to shape my future, and I've got to do whatever it takes in order to get in, and I did. And they don't accept people after freshman year. So whatever attrition, you know, people move away, whatever. Out of that 200, 118 graduated in my graduating class. So you know, it's an important thing to just maintain that drive. Uh, where even as you go in, whether you come into Microsoft and you'll get a role. Some roles are harder than others. Some things are different than others. But if you keep your goal ahead of you in terms of where you want to be in your career, it can uh, carry you forward. So one of the other things about Detroit is because it was dangerous and I had loving parents, they did not let me do much. I couldn't go many places because, and rightfully so, there were some dangerous places to go. There was someone in my class that ended up, he didn't make it because, violence and things in Detroit. So it was a reality. And when I got into Michigan, it's like, oh my goodness, Ann Arbor is such a nice college town, so much freedom. And that freedom got me in some trouble. So I went into Michigan in the engineering school. I was going to be an aeronautical engineer. And I got to material science and engineering. And I looked at these lattices and I said, I don't think I enjoy this for a daily thing. But I had some friends and we go to the computer labs and we play these games and you could get to a point where you could write parts of the game. And I was enjoying writing in C more so than in Fortran, which is what they made the engineers learn at the time. So unfortunately, my grades did not stay where they were supposed to be, and I lost my scholarship, which was quite a blow for my family, as you might guess. It was very, very much a sad day, but I think it was needed because that led to me going into the Air Force. And so, in my brief overview, when I started in the Air Force, I went in as a programmer. So I had some of the schooling, and there's a lot of tests that you take in order to determine what job you get. There was an electronic data processors test, and you get one shot. And if you don't score above a certain number, you will never be a programmer in the Air Force. It was just that way. So I ended up getting sent to Nebraska. There's a base called Offutt Air Force Base, middle of the country, very flat, very boring, very few distractions, but I learned a ton. So the application I worked on communicated to nuclear missile bases and other things, targeting that type of stuff. It was written in assembly language on mainframe. Uh, That system was as old as I was. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what is this old stuff? But I didn't really have that attitude. It was like, wow, look at what this system does. So I had a top secret clearance, did a lot of interesting things there. And, that really uh, galvanized my path. I finished school at the University of Nebraska, which was near the base. And I did it during evenings. I was working in the day, go to class in the evenings. They had a program where once you got close enough to graduation, you could go full time and pay back that time. And so that's what I did. Got a lot of different honors and things while I was in. There's my little plaque here was one of them. Got commendation medal for my time there, which was really something that was pretty special for me because it's kind of rare for someone who's first trying to get that. So while I was in Visual Basic 3.0, it was still 16-bit at the time. So I'm probably much older than everyone else on this call. So I'll just give you a little bit of history, but I'm not going to bore you. Back in my day, we walked uphill both ways. There's not going to be any of that. But that's what got me into some of the Microsoft technologies because everything I was working on was either mainframe or mini computer, hardcore C type of stuff, flat files, ISAM files, stuff that you probably don't deal with anymore. But it was so easy to get things developed, and other groups on the base asked for things to be developed. So I got to a point where a friend of mine was working for Hughes Aerospace, and I had a contract. I was a consultant while I was still in during my last year, and I was making more on the weekends consulting than I would make an entire month in the Air Force. So I said, oh yeah, this works. I can do that. So that's what I did. So after I got out of the Air Force, I spent a long time being a consultant, working for different companies, different Microsoft partners. I worked for Hewlett Packard for a while, and I was working with Microsoft Consulting Services on retainer, which was pretty cool. It's nice when you have a utilization target and Microsoft has paid 100% of it. It's like an attorney who's on retainer where they just get paid. So that was great, but it introduced me to a number of big companies. And one theme of my career, and just a couple of things that really drive me, is working on big and meaningful things. So you can see some of the logos on the screen were some of the projects that after I left HP and went to Microsoft in 2005, I had a chance to work on some milestones for some of these companies. Like, for example, I'm not going to read the slide to you. You can see some of the things like US Bank's first online banking. Part of this, I was very deep into SQL Server technologies, SQL Server internals. So I was pretty much on the high end of performance tuning, infrastructure planning, database build out. So some of my programming shifted to more of the data side. So pretty much the whole box, like Home Depot. So SQL 2005 came out, Itanium came out, and I had to get really deep because Home Depot bought one of the biggest servers that existed at the time, something called the HP Superdome. So I made some contacts even in the SQL product team as we were trying to work through some of the things. Don't know if anyone on the call is used to Home Depot, but there's the normal way to do things, and then there's the Home Depot way to do things, because Home Depot is the big orange box and they are special. And so is Macy's. Macy's is very special too. And consulting is always interesting because you learn so much more about how companies operate, their technology stack, things that you interact with every day are, they seem simple, and then you get behind the scenes and they're not so simple. Uh, so I've held consulting roles at Microsoft, eventually becoming a principal consultant. Then I transitioned into a group called Commercial Software Engineering. And that group mainly deals with ISVs, so companies like Citrix or a number of companies that provide software as a service, Cloudera, lots of big ones where they'll have an offering on Azure where their business is dependent on Microsoft. So, for example, Walmart is one of the big customers who we deal with. But in addition to that, I led the government team. So I had all the military intelligence groups, but I also had the United Nations. And this picture is one that I kind of enjoy because here I was in Geneva, Switzerland at their headquarters. And they have an annual global summit for AI for good. And in this case, part of the reason I was here was to help design a system that the United Nations would own, where it was a platform using Data Lake and Spark and some of our other systems to try and build solutions for a number of developing countries that did not have the money or even the technological infrastructure to do it. So we had to do it in the cloud. And this was really for women employment, women empowerment of families. There are a lot of places around the world that, that's a very different experience for a lot of people. So very meaningful work, global scale types of things. And that led me to Azure SQL. So when you're actually working on a hyperscale cloud platform that is around the world, and you do things like you issue a command and it affects, I don't know, 300,000 people at a time. Here's another command that you can use that can affect millions. It's a different type of scale. It's a different type of responsibility, but it's something that has really energized me. I've had some really big customers, but none of my customers are near the type of scale that we have in Azure. So you can see some of the stats that I've written down here. The area that I work in is called SQL Backplane, and it supports the infrastructure for all these various offerings, services that we have in Azure. So anytime there's a deployment, which actually happens continuously, it routes through a lot of software that we've built to automate. So we are the, if you will, the database administrators for millions of databases across all kinds of industries, whether it's the Air Force, whether it's Walmart, whether it's a hospital or a school. So there's another layer of responsibility that you have. And we don't have millions of people on the team to do this, right? So there's a lot of software that we write and maintain that handles the upgrades. So if you deploy a database, hey, I want a new database, it's part of our software. If you grow its size, if you move it, if it fails over for reasons, all these types of things impact the area that we work in. So the main languages, C#. There are some things written in C++. There are a number of Windows APIs, as well as some other things that we need to have C++ where there's no garbage collection, slowing us down dramatically when there's something we're rolling out at huge scale. We use Service Fabric. It's an orchestrator similar to some of the things that you would get from Kubernetes. So a lot of interaction with services, use a number of design patterns like finite state machines and other things in order to manage all of this platform. And yeah, I'm pretty much at the end of what I wanted to say. But one thing that's really great about this event is that we reach a lot of people. So I have a team of 5 engineers in Atlanta. We're opening a new location called Atlantic Yards next month. So we're all really excited to see that ramp up. And one of the members of my team actually came through a program like this. So I mentioned to him that, hey, I'm going to be speaking at one. So he was pretty excited about that. And we're excited to have you all here. So with that.
So Brian, is it okay if I have a couple of follow-up questions?
Absolutely.
So a little bit about your team. So you said you have 5 engineers on your team. Is that everyone? And if so, what are some of their roles?
Sure. So the backplane team has about 170. So we're a specific piece. So their roles, they're all software engineers dedicated to building different parts of the system. So it's broken up into a number of components, and each person is given some ownership of their component, and we do collaborate as we get things like repair items. So one person is responsible for telemetry, for example. When you're doing things at an automated pace around the world, and if something goes wrong in, let's say, 2%, well, 2% of a really big number is a really big number. So they do things to create automation to mitigate some of those items. So yeah, they're all C sharp. In fact, the person who came through this program, he's our C++ person. So there's a component that he's writing to allow us to update the server while the binary is actually running. So it will actually go in and remap areas of memory into the updated code so that when a customer is running their workload, it's not interrupted, even though we can actually change the software in flight. So
that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give someone that is coming in to interview at Microsoft? So as your role as a software engineering manager, what would be your advice to a candidate that's going to interview?
Yeah. So I have a few bits of advice. One is passion. There is always something to learn. I've been at it for a long time, and there are still things I learn. And if you don't have that passion to continuously learn, that will not serve you well, right? So if there's something that interests you or excites you while you're interviewing, go ahead and share that. Right? Because the things I'm looking for are background. Right? You have some background in programming and are able to logically think through a problem. Some of our tests and things that we ask are really designed around, can you take a problem space and decompose it logically? The systems that we work on are enormous, right? Most likely it will be larger than anything you've worked on. So what's most important is your ability to learn and adapt, your ability to think logically so that you can contribute to a larger whole. Right? Can you see the big picture and then bring it down to the specific area and understand how this area impacts the others?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna thank you for being our keynote, and I see some questions actually coming in the chat that are directed to you specifically. So I'm going to start introducing our panelists, but Brian, if you could take a look at the chat and maybe answer some of the questions that are coming in, and then I'll bring you back for our panel discussion. Sound good?
Sorry. All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. So let me go ahead and share my slides once again. So if you have questions for Brian, feel free to drop those questions in the chat. Again, Brian is a engineering team manager. So let me just Principal Software Engineering Manager. So if you have questions for Brian, drop those questions in the chat, and then let me go ahead and introduce our panelists, because we've got about 30 minutes of introductions before we get started with our panel discussion and live Q&A. So the next person I'd like to introduce is Aaron Malvo, Program Manager there at Microsoft. So Aaron, if you're ready. And Aaron is also a Howard University graduate of HBCU, obviously. So welcome, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you. So hello, everybody. My name is Aaron Malvo. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I actually just moved to Atlanta this January, and I also will be working out of the Atlantic Yards office. I went to Howard for my bachelor's in computer science, and I also studied my master's there as well. I've been at Microsoft for the past 5 years as a program manager. I'm currently a program manager on the Azure Usage Billing team, which is within Azure Data as well. I just started there last year, and I actually was a PM on Brian's team previously, I think before he got there. But yeah, so that's been my journey into Microsoft. I guess if I talk about, give me 1 second. Outside of work, some of my hobbies, I like to bake and sing and act and all that stuff and spending time. I come from a large family. I'm one of 7, and I have 8 nephews and nieces. So yeah, big family. Of course, listening to music, watching shows. I need to watch Bridgerton season 2, catch up on that. Just finished Abbott Elementary. Also got into Yellowstone. So yeah, that's just some outside of work stuff about me as well. And so, Will, did you have questions that you wanted me to answer as well?
You know I do. Yes, sir. So I went to the other HU, but I'll take it easy on you. But so what was the path from Howard? Did you go directly to Microsoft as an intern, and then you, after you graduated, you came on full time, or did you make some pit stops at some other companies?
Gotcha. So I did, I started at Howard as an intern. So my sophomore year, I interned in the Microsoft Explorer program, which is a program where you can rotate through the different disciplines. Back then, there were 3. So there was, what's that thing called? A software engineer in test, and then a program manager. And
Okay.
so I ended up choosing the program manager route. So I started in Office on the OneNote team, and then I moved to I guess what's now the Backplane team in Azure Data, and that's kind of where I've been ever since. And most recently, I moved to the billing team that's focused on, a billing, because Brian talked a lot about scale when you're doing a cloud. So for all of those databases that he is the database administrator for, my team is the penny counter for. So we're counting all the money, like making sure if this database is up and running and live, that we are making sure that we're collecting, and billing customers for that usage.
Awesome, awesome. So let's talk about locations. So you're originally from Houston, Texas. Currently, you're in Seattle, but you're going to move to Atlanta. Is that correct?
Oh no, I forgot to update the slide.
Okay, no worries. No worries.
I'm currently in Atlanta right now.
Oh, okay, but did you previously work in Seattle?
Yes, yeah, I was in Seattle for my first basically 5 years at Microsoft.
Okay, so a lot of people have sort of a fear of that relocation, right? Especially when we're talking about a lot of African American or Latinx candidates that might be from New York down to Florida across to Texas, right?
Yeah.
So, can you talk a little bit about your experience going to the Seattle or Pacific Northwest? Maybe some of the things that you ended up liking about it, or what that experience was like when you had to relocate.
Okay, awesome. So for me, I got used to relocating. So I relocated from Houston to DC to go to Howard. And then from Howard to Seattle during the summertime, it made it a little easier because I kind of had a community there. So it wasn't as daunting. The funny thing is, I ended up creating a whole nother group of friends once I moved there and building a whole other community. But it was It was daunting. I will say after a while, the reason why I relocated to Atlanta was to be a little bit closer to my family because it was a lot to kind of like doing all that travel, like on holidays or for every birthday or for all that stuff, like doing a lot of travel, it like wore on you. And, you think like, I want to go travel to go do fun stuff. And I mean, seeing family is fun too, but it's like, it can feel like an obligation.
I get
So
it.
I see a couple questions in the chat for me. Did you want me to answer those?
Well, I'll have you
Or
answer those. Yeah,
Mhm.
after I let you go. But I want to get
Oh,
a
I
couple of
see.
yeah, I want to get a couple of questions in because I
Okay.
know we have a lot. Like whenever we do a Microsoft event, there's always a lot of people that say, "How can I land a program management opportunity at Microsoft?"
Hmm.
So if you could give any advice to our candidates, and I know we have a lot of software engineering candidates here, but I know we have a lot of folks interested in program management. So if you have any advice for the candidates that are interested in going into, technical program management at Microsoft, what would you tell them?
Ooh, okay. So I will say it's it's not impossible to do. I think I had like the route that I came in through the internship program definitely was a more straight shot because it's like, when you intern, they have, headcount to hire you, full time. And so that transition is really easy. From what I've seen from people, that work on my team that are coming in through the industry, I've definitely seen people that, they've gotten their PMP to kind of like establish those program management and project management principles. So because those are very useful at Microsoft. Definitely having a technical background helps because Microsoft recently split up the roles between product management and technical program manager, but there's still room, to learn on the job, but I definitely would say the PMP, which or just like establishing program management principles, not necessarily getting the certification, but having those works well. And as in I would say one of the best ways, I mean, just from my experience, because that's what I can speak from, is definitely going through I'm not sure how many college students we have, but going through the internship program is a great way to land the program management role. But also two people on my team were just hired as one, program manager one that has had industry experience in program management. And he completed his PMP after he got the job. And then another team member that was, more senior level, but also industry experience, program management coming into the team.
Awesome. Okay, so to all you program management candidates out there, definitely listen to Aaron. Ask him questions in the chat after he finishes up. But I got one more question for you, Aaron.
Okay.
So what is it that you like most about working for Microsoft?
Ooh. I would always say it always boils down to the people for me. That's how I choose, a team, choose a role. There's what's in the job description, but then there's also the people that you work with. And so for me, it's always been the people since I first started, the mentors that I've had and the connections that I've built. For me, it's always been the people, and that's kind of why I stayed, or why I've moved to different roles and different things like that.
Awesome. So let us thank Aaron for being one of our panelists. Aaron, I'll bring you back for the panel discussion. But in the meantime, to our candidates, if you have questions specifically for Aaron as a program manager at Microsoft, feel free to drop those questions in the chat. And then Aaron, I'll ask you to keep an eye on the chat for any questions that you can answer in the meantime. All right, so let me bring on our next panelist, who is Mallory Williams, a software engineer on the team there at Microsoft and Azure Data. So Mallory, if you're ready.
So I'm Mallory, as it says, I'm from Fort Worth. So I didn't go to an HBCU. I'm just Black and went to a college. So, there we go. But I actually, funnily enough, didn't even know I wanted to do computer science. Like when I went to my university, I was actually planning on becoming an interpreter. So I started learning Japanese, right? I ended up minoring in it, but like the first computer science class I went into, and I just did that because like my friend was super into it. I actually really hated it at first. I didn't understand anything. I was like, why would anyone do this? This is so dumb. I hate this. But then as time went on, I was like, oh wait, this is actually kind of cool. I think I get it now because I guess I'm just like logical thinking kind of vibes with me. So from then on, I was like, okay, I guess I'll like major in this, right? So then eventually graduated, and my first job was at this place called Epic, which is in Wisconsin. It's a software engineering company, not the game company. Software engineering, oh my God. Healthcare software engineering company. And it was an experience. We use this language called Cache, which I'm assuming most people haven't heard of because I think it's specifically for like the healthcare software industry. And I stayed there for a few years, but Wisconsin was not really the place for me. Like I'm originally from Texas, and then I went to UPenn, which is in Philadelphia. So I moved to Wisconsin. There are like no Black people, and I was like, I don't think I can do this for very long. And eventually I left and came here. And it was funny because people were always like, oh, this is Seattle. We don't have that many Black people here. And it's like, but I see more than like five when I'm walking down the street. Like, this is great, right? So, yeah, that's basically how I got here. And Microsoft has been, nice. So I've stayed for almost 4 years or a little over 4 years.
So
It's
can you talk?
epic. Nice comment.
So how did you get your foot in the door? Did you apply online? Did someone invite you to apply? How did you get your foot in the door at Microsoft?
Actually, it was an invitation. I guess this is also why it's important to keep your LinkedIn up to date. I got somebody who they actually apparently like just recruit from Epic. They're like, oh, hey, I saw your experience. You should apply. And I was like, okay. So yeah, I did. Like I don't know. I'd always thought of Microsoft as kind of like oh, I don't even know if I can even like make it there. So like when somebody like actively like, headhunted me, I was like, oh, okay, cool. I guess we'll see where that goes. And here I am.
So what was the interview process like for you? So I know we have some software engineering candidates
Mhm.
that may go through that interview process. So what would you tell them about the interview process?
Hmm. Let's see. So mine, I guess it was kind of typical of what, software devs go through where it's like 4 or 5 interviews. In my case, it was 4 and they were back to back and I was finished before lunch. But I think the best advice I could give, and this is obviously easier said than done, is to not be nervous. And I know that sounds really useless, but I don't know. I just kind of went in thinking of it more like if I do well, I do well. If I get it, I get it. If I don't, there's somewhere else for me. And I think that energy kind of translated and also kind of helped calm me down so that I could
Yep.
think more clearly. And also something too that took me a while to learn as well. Like when you're interviewing and you're asking questions to the interviewer, like you don't necessarily have to worry too much about like whether the questions will make you, I don't know, look good, but focus on things that you really do want to know. Like in my case, it's more like, okay, so what's a day in the life on your team? Like what's the work-life balance? Like, what do you like most about your manager, the people that you work with, et cetera? Because that was very important for me to know, like, based on these answers, do I even want to be here? So that's very, very important. Like it's not just them deciding whether you're a good fit for their team, you have to do the same too.
You just gave me some good questions to follow up with you on.
Oh, great.
So what is a day in the life like for you as a software engineer there at Microsoft in the Azure Data?
For me, it can depend. Like, actually, I was just recently on call, which might kind of be sort of a good thing to start off with because I think people typically view on call as like, oh no, I'm going to get like, called at like 5 in the morning for some issue that I don't know how to solve. What is my life?
Mhm.
But at least on my team anyway, we have a like dedicated 8 hour slot that you're responsible for. And beyond that, it's like you can like hand it off to somebody else. Like we have like a sister team in Serbia. So for them, like our like dead hours of the night are their like, daytime hours. So if anything's past like, 1 a.m. or something, they get it. So we can, have a full night's sleep and stuff like that. Otherwise, for me, it's usually like I am assigned like a task or a project, and we on my team have like Scrum meetings 3 times a week or so. So for the most part, I'll kind of like work on my stuff, go to Scrum, and that's where I give updates, and most importantly, can get help whenever I'm stuck, because Azure SQL is a very, very complex area. So it's common for that to happen, for me to be like, hey, I'm doing this and I don't know what is going on. And the next day it's like, okay, solve that problem. What is this?
Uh-huh.
So it's very nice that like I feel like I'm supported by my team, and like my team is also just very collaborative in general. Like I can't remember the last time I've ever just kind of been by myself doing something and haven't had to like, interact with other people.
So let me ask another programmer, software engineering type question.
Mhm.
That is, what languages were you familiar with when you came into Microsoft, and then what languages do you currently use in your current role?
Before Microsoft, and this is also why like, studying for interviews was pretty important. Like when I worked at Epic, I used Cache, like I mentioned, and that's not OOP at all, like, not even the slightest. But like when I was learning, like when I was in college and taking CS classes, I used Java a ton.
Yep.
And on my team now, we use C++ too, but I took like one class in that, so I don't remember anything about it. But since we primarily use C#, like I just when I was studying for interviews, I just kind of brushed up on my Java, and my team was like, well, it's like 90% the same thing. Like it's fine. So those were the languages I knew going in. Now, like I mentioned, I use C# like all the time. And there are some people on my team, like on the engine side of things, that use C++. But I do want to learn that, but like that'll probably be a little more down the line.
Awesome. So one last question, and this is my favorite question for everyone else.
Uh-huh.
So prep. What is it that you like most about working for Microsoft?
Okay. So I know everybody says people, and that's the thing too, but for me, it's work-life balance. Like,
Okay.
yeah, like I do really like my job, but I also have a life. I like things outside of my job too. So it's like, so it's nice that I can just like end my day and it's like, okay, now I can go like hang out with friends, or I can go play video games, or I can go to the gym or something like that.
Awesome. Work-life balance.
Yes.
People are themes that I've heard, having done probably 30 to 40 Microsoft events. So love it. So thanks, Mallory, for being one of our panelists. I'll bring you back for the panel discussion. To our candidates, if you have questions specifically for Mallory, please drop those questions in the chat. And then Mallory, I'll ask you to keep an eye on the chat for any questions you might be able to answer. All right, so let me introduce our next panelist, who is Xenia Herzenberg, Senior Software Engineer on the Microsoft Azure Data team. So Xenia, if you're ready.
Hello, I'm ready. I hope you can see my video.
Yes.
I'm not really in Rome. I'm here in Seattle. So it doesn't say so on the slide, but I'm originally from Russia. I came to Seattle specifically to study at the University of Washington, and much like Mallory, I had a different specialty. I came to study anthropology, but then when I had exposure to exact sciences, I had exposure to computer science, and I was just swept away, and I switched the specialty, and I stayed with it ever since. And I'd like to share a story how I ended up in Microsoft. So I graduated a while back, and I actually had a career in software engineering. I was a mobile engineer for most of it. I was developing iOS apps and apps for iPads mostly. It was a lucrative job, but I got more and more interested in working on the back end, doing the distributed systems. It seems that that's where all the things are happening. And I was trying to break through at my at the company where I worked before, so Fluke Corporation, which is also a fairly big company. But the opportunity was not coming, and then a Microsoft recruiter reached out to me and said, "Yeah, we have a manager who is interested in you as a possible candidate." Well, sure. So I talked to the manager, and they are saying that they have a team in revenue reporting processing all of Microsoft revenue, and all in the back end, no front end. all about data pipelines, HDI clusters, SQL servers, Scala, Apache Spark, and I'm listening, and my eyes light up, and I perk up like, wow, it sounds like a dream. But me being me, I'm a pretty straightforward person. I say to the manager, it sounds wonderful. I would love to come and join your team because I like money and it's revenue, and I would love to be on the back end, and it's all data, it's all the back end. But I must be honest with you, of all the technologies that you mentioned, like I know none of them. I know no Spark. I never worked with Spark. I don't know Scala. I don't know, like, I never designed a data pipeline in my life and never saw it. So, are you sure? And he said, yeah, we're not looking for somebody who knows everything. We're looking for somebody who has a growth mindset, is curious and willing to learn. And when I heard that, I'm sold. So that was 3.5 years ago. I had, like Mallory mentioned, I had a pretty standard round of interviews, 4 interviews, software engineers, product manager on the team, the manager's manager on the team. We really, the team liked me. I liked the team. I spent 2 very happy years building data pipelines with a technology that I never touched before. And I do feel that there is the culture of learning and helping each other grow. And I think, there is some time to onboard and to learn new things, but you're able to pick it up and contribute very, very quickly. And now I'm actually on the data governance team working for a product called Purview. Again, on the back end, writing services to help parts of our service talk to each other and talk to external partners. So very happy there. That's my story.
I've got a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
And considering your background, having worked at a different company before you went to Microsoft, what's different about the Microsoft culture and environment as compared to some of your previous employers?
So first of all, I feel that Microsoft is really, really strong on diversity and inclusion. Being a woman, I really feel that there is a lot of effort put into that, and a lot of investment in employees, a lot of learning opportunities, a lot of opportunity to just take care of yourself mentally and physically. We are coming out of this pandemic. It hit some people very, very heavily, and I'm happy to see how the company addresses that. And really, the investment in growth mindset, it's not just words. It is true. The culture of I don't know it, but I will learn it, and then this will be good for me and good for the company. It's very much true.
Well, let me ask you my favorite question, and that is, what is it for you personally that you like most about working for Microsoft?
Boy, I love learning. I love how many resources are coming my way, right? We have access to LinkedIn resources. We have access to Pluralsight. There is grants to go, get another degree. Of course, learning from my coworkers. I really work with most brilliant people in the business. If you like to learn, if that's important to you, if it's a priority, the Microsoft is a place for you.
Awesome.
It's like being in college, but you're also paid rather than paying.
Love it. So Xenia, let me thank you for being one of our panelists. I'm going to introduce our next panelist, but if you have questions specifically for Xenia, please drop those questions in the chat, and then we'll bring Xenia as well as the other panelists all together for our panel discussion here shortly. Okay, so Bruno, our next speaker is Bruno Ramirez, software engineer on the team there at Microsoft Azure Data. So Bruno, if you're ready.
Hey, hello. Yeah, this is Bruno. I grew up in Mexico City. I just relocated here to Seattle 2 years and 3 months now, right before the pandemic. Yeah, I studied telematics engineering in the Polytechnic like National Institute, which is a public college in Mexico City and other parts of Mexico also. But at that point, I decided to. I mean, this is more oriented to telecommunications and informatics, and I decide to lean on the computer science and informatics side. Uh, since then, I mean, right now I work for Cosmos in Azure Data, which is an internal service, but also we have like certain parts publicly like available, which maybe you might know, which is Azure Synapse, Azure Data Lake Analytics also runs in some parts in Cosmos. And yes, practically the service is a big data batch processing service in the cloud, serverless, right? That means like customer don't worry about like maintaining like a big infrastructure, like setting up clusters, setting up machines, setting up like networking, etc., which is all this overhead that usually takes to configure and scale system and a distribute system. But in this case, all is managed by Microsoft, right? And yeah, I don't know. It's been a while since I am in the big data war. I believe I started working in different projects with different professors and researchers when I was in college still, and I don't know. At that moment, I really like this specialty. I really like to work with distributed systems, to work with data, right? Data at scale brings like great opportunity to learn more about like the business or the world that is around you, right? So enabling people to learn and to process data in a reliable and quick way was very appealing to me. It was very, very interesting since then. So after college, I started working for different companies, for Oracle, also working in some big data system. Uh, in Amazon, I work as a consultant. As Brian said, like being consultant sometimes give you like this perspective from the customer, right? You have the opportunity to work with different customers, with different industries, with different like use cases that gives you the perspective on how actually the system are applied out there, right? How the customers are using the service and how they get benefits from it. So yes, I work as a consultant, traveling in Mexico and Latin America for different customers, and then yeah, I mean, I got in touch with all these technologies, such, Apache Spark, Yarn, Hadoop, Flink, etc., and of course like cloud systems. And but I was like seeing like the services from the customer perspective, right? And at that point, I said like, oh, this is really interesting. I want to, get to know the system, how it works internally. Yeah, Microsoft had uh, an event in Mexico City, especially Azure Data went to Mexico City to recruit people. Yeah, I received the invitation and I attend, and yeah, I had the opportunity to interview with amazing engineers that of course like told me like about the culture, told me about like the opportunities, the technologies in the organization. And yeah, of course I was really excited about it, since that's exactly what I wanted, right? Yeah, that's practically my story.
So, quick question for you: How was the relocation to the Pacific Northwest from Mexico?
Uh yeah, it's 6 hours. It's 6 hours fly. It's not that far. It's not far. That's good thing. So I have the opportunity to visit my family often, and also family coming and friends coming. Um, but yeah, everything was very quick. To be honest, the move from Mexico was very, very smooth. I didn't have any complication. Microsoft always was very, like considering like what I needed, how to do like this like process of moving from one place to another, from one country to another, without like difficulty. So of course you don't have to worry about like the move. You just have to worry about um, get started with the team, right? Which it was the most interesting for me. So yes, it was very, very smooth, I would say.
So far with your 2 years there at Microsoft, what is it that you like most about working for the company?
Oof. I will say, I mean, I like a lot of things, but especially, I think the service Cosmos is a pretty big, um, big data system in the world. It's one of the biggest ones, and I would say like to have the opportunity to be in a team with such amazing engineers working in a big scalable system, right? That impacts practically the whole organization and external customers without also losing like the the work-life balance and good practices and like opportunities to grow as a professional and also as a person, right?
Awesome. So Bruno, let me thank you for being one of our panelists. If you have questions specifically for Bruno as a software engineer, feel free to drop those questions in the chat. And then Bruno, I'll ask you to keep an eye on the chat, and then I'll bring you back for our panel discussion here shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bruno. All right, so last but not least, I have Amika Nduaguba, who's a principal software engineer there on the Microsoft Azure Data team. So Amika, if you're ready. I think you're on mute. There you go.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emeka, software engineer at Microsoft. I joined back in 2001 to a product before it was publicly known as SharePoint, and worked around different groups at Microsoft, finally in data, Azure Data. And I am originally from Nigeria, born in Rome, Italy, moved around between Nigeria, Rome, back and forth. Then finally came to Oregon. I attended Oregon State University. I'm not a software engineer. I just like to write code for fun. And somehow, somewhere, I got in contact with a Microsoft recruiter. I wasn't planning to. I was just walking by one of our buildings and at Oregon State. I was a hungry student. So I saw a bunch of t-shirts wrapped in something that looked like rice and cheese. So I thought it was food. And I walked over and I saw that nobody was picking it up. And I'm like, huh, would anyone mind if I picked one of those? So I picked one of them. And on the other side, it said Microsoft. And the lady there is like, oh, it's fine. Take another one. I'm like, really? Free food? So I packed a bunch of them. And and then I opened it was a shirt. And I'm like, I'm really hungry. I thought it was food. And it's like, there's going to be food later. You can come later. And then I came later on. We were having a conversation and a bunch of people that were being recruited. I'm not software major, so I couldn't say what others were saying. I couldn't explain things like others. But I write code and I had passion. I guess I demonstrated passion. So that was enough. And somehow, somewhere, a few months later, they called me for an interview, and that's where it started. So what's the other part?
No worries. So I love that story. That story is cool. So when you came in, did you come in after graduation or did you come in as an intern?
I came in as after I was actually doing my master's and I was working for some company, some startup, and we were building some robotics, human face tracking, human tracking objects. And somewhere in between there, Microsoft called, and we were also writing software that run on Microsoft, and we always had an issue with Microsoft. So it was the enemy. And finally, I'm like, I'm gonna go there and fix that thing. Little did I know how big Microsoft was and how massive it was. So
wow. So you've been at Microsoft for 21 years.
Yeah.
So what keeps 22? So what keeps you there at Microsoft Mecca?
I don't really think about it. Time just flies if you do something you like. And part of it is most of the effect I want to have on Earth and around my life, around people around me, I can see the path through Microsoft. So, and you can probably see it through many companies, but if you're good with a hammer and you can go fix nail problems, not everything. So Microsoft has presence in almost every country, at least, and it has software in almost every area of life. And if you come in, you most likely will be in one region, but if you look around, you realize that we have our fingerprints everywhere else. So it's, if you explore, you will find.
And what is it that you like most about working for the company?
It might not show, but I like people from different parts of the world. I'm always obsessed with what's going on in Philippines, what's going on over here. There's 8 billion people. Where are all these billions of people and what are they doing? And so you see a small version of them at Microsoft. You interact with them in random Teams meetings, and it's interesting. So you learn things outside of the meetings, outside of the little fights, the little arguments, the little, oh, I think this is right, you're right. You get to learn something about other people. So
Awesome. So Emeka, I'm going to kick off our panel discussion by asking you the first question.
okay.
But in the meantime, to our other Microsoft panelists, let's go ahead and get started with our panel discussion. So to our other Microsoft team members, if you can turn on your video, and then what I'll do, because we don't have a whole lot of time, we got about 20 minutes left. What I'm going to do is I'm going to prioritize questions that I see coming from the chat, as opposed to the questions that I have prepared, so that our candidates can get the most out of the panel discussion. But like I said, we're going to start the panel discussion off with Emeka, since I have him here as our last speaker. And that first question is, what's different about working for the Azure data team as compared to maybe some of the other teams you've worked for within Microsoft?
I would say that to me, data has always been the most important thing in human life. It's information management, and there are different aspects to it. And so what data offers me is, I guess, I joined data so I can learn. I can learn about the best way to manage information at a large scale. And what I value in what I see different in data versus other teams is two parts. One is, since Satya became our CEO, there's been a lot of cultural changes. And I perceive and see those cultures, even the conversation we're having right now, even this form of meetings, it was not possible, or it was unheard of 10 years ago. The other version of it is, seeing a woman in a meeting is unheard of before. So there's been a lot of changes, and data has like a front and center intention in fixing things or changing things, and always asking, what could we do better? How do we do it? Let's try. So it's a good thing. For me, that's the change I noticed over the years.
Awesome. So thanks, Emeka. All right, so I'm going to start pulling questions from the chat. So to our candidates, if you have questions that you would like me to pose to our panelists, I'll go ahead and do that as I see those questions coming in. And to our panelists, let's kind of do like rapid fire, right? So I'll ask you all a question. Let's see how fast we can get the question answered, and then how many questions we can try to get answered before our time is up. So first question I see, and this is going to be an open question, so if someone on the panel would like to volunteer to answer that, feel free. But the question is from Ravaldi, and that is, I wanted to know if any of you have dealt with imposter syndrome being at Microsoft, and if so, how did you get past that?
Wow. Oh, you want to go first?
I dealt with it like Monday, right? So I would say that it's common. It comes up and it goes. It's natural. It's normal. A lot of times the way that I've been pulled, I can pull myself out of it. Sometimes my manager would slap me out of it. Like this Monday, she was just like, "You're the expert. Like, you tell them what to do. You're not coming here for advice. You're supposed to tell them." And I'm like, "You're right. I am the expert." And then like I kind of like snap out of it. I think that it's really easy to question yourself and think that everyone else has the right answers. When there's this quote, it says like, that person that you're waiting for to come save you, it's you. And that's kind of what kind of gets me out of that imposter syndrome. So yeah.
Xenia, did you want to add something? I think you're on mute. You're on mute.
Oopsie. Yeah. I want to add to this. So to the person who is asking it, you know that imposter syndrome exists. That already puts you ahead, right? Because you can catch yourself and say, well, wait a second. This is a symptom, I can cope with that. I will bet that everybody here has it, even though we worked in the industry for a long time. You know, it comes and goes, and you just need to work out a strategy to bring yourself up back to reality. But you're on a good path if you know that it exists and you can experience it.
Awesome. Thanks, Xenia. So I see another question from the chat, and this one's from Brianna Williams. And that question, I'm going to pose it by default to Brian, but if anyone else would like to chime in, and that is, what skill set besides passion and willingness to learn do you think would make a candidate stand out in a potential interview?
So what skill set besides passion?
Besides, passion and willingness to learn. What other skill sets?
One where you can demonstrate that you understand the business, you understand the role that you're applying to. So, because when you do that, you'll be able to ask insightful questions. So whenever you get an interview and they'll say, well, tell me about yourself. And whenever I interview people at the end, I always say, do you have any questions for me? And part of the thing I discover about some people is really, how interested are you in this job? It's another form of passion, but if you're educated in terms of what does this company do, what does this role do, you'll be able to visualize how you can contribute. And that's really what interviewers want to know is, if I brought you on the team, A, do you want to be there? B, what do you bring to the team? C, are you not just a participant, but are you really ready to try and drive?
Awesome. Thanks, Brian, for that answer. So I'm going to pull this next question from my little cheat sheet here of candidate questions that I've prepared. And this one's from Mallory. So Mallory, do you feel that you can be yourself, culturally speaking, as a minority at Microsoft?
Yeah, very much so. I don't know. Like I have an interesting personality, I guess. And that is like wherever I go, people have been pretty like open and receptive to it. So I haven't ever felt like, oh no, I can't say X, Y, and Z. I can't do X, Y, and Z. So that's something that I didn't really think about when you asked the question about, what I like most about Microsoft, but that would probably come in as a very, very close second to work-life balance. So yeah, like I have been places before, like at my previous job, where I felt like I couldn't really be myself. And that was one of the reasons too why I left. It's very suffocating. It's like I already have like, I have a lot of stuff to worry about. And then now it's like I can't even be myself at my own job. Like, yeah.
Great to know. So thanks, Mallory, for that answer. Next question I'm going to pose to Bruno. Bruno, what is one thing that you wish you knew before you started working at Microsoft?
Oh, I would
Any
say
surprises?
yeah, I would say, yeah, I wasn't expecting like the challenges. I mean, I knew it will be like very challenging, right? But there are like a ton of like interesting technical challenges in the big data space that need to be solved. And every time like new technologies like surging that try to solve like all of these challenges, right? So I was in the mindset that there will be like challenges, but I mean, they are like, it's a universe, right? So to be in this scale, to be in this service has opened like my eyes to see like all those challenges that keeps me like, like having this passion for what I do.
Awesome. Thanks, Bruno. So I see a good question that came in from the chat from Sydney Crawley. And I'm going to pose this one to Zania. Zania, so is there any onboarding or training that happens when folks are hired, or do they kind of just get thrown into the mix and have to find their own groove?
Good question. It depends on the group, but usually there is an effort to onboard a person. In some groups, they will just assign kind of a buddy to you and they will guide you. More often, in my experience, they give you the documentation, they set you up, and you're just part of the group, and you're encouraged to ask questions. So you're, within your group, you will have something like a Scrum team or an Agile team. So you're not isolated, and they will be your primary resource. And then when they don't know something, then they will redirect you to further resources with your questions.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask a tag along question, and I'm just going to open this up to anyone on the panel that would like to answer. But I'm going to have to default it to those that have been at Microsoft the longest. So I'm looking at Emeka and Brian, right? But does Microsoft have an opportunity for employees to connect with mentors at the company?
Yes. In fact, I answered a question like that in the chat too, so it'll be a little lengthier when I wrote it than what I'm going to say. But yes, mentorship is very, very big at Microsoft. There's a website that we have internally for people to be able to sign up and for people to find mentors. Even within your team, the way that we do performance reviews, mentorship is almost expected the more senior you become. In fact, it's not almost, it is. It's one of those things. How are you helping others to succeed? It's incredibly important, right? It's evaluated at all times. There are also groups, right? That we call them employee resource groups or ERGs. So there's OLAF for Hispanics, there's Blacks at Microsoft, there's military at Microsoft. I mean, people can fit into multiple ones of these, and everyone's encouraged. And through these, you also can get mentors. So like I've gotten one myself through military at Microsoft. I was a very senior manager in a different group. And sometimes that's what you want. It's great to have mentors in your area, but it's even better when you also have mentors in other parts of the company who are doing something differently, who have more experience, because they can give you that perspective that you need.
Awesome. So excellent answer, Brian. And I'm going to throw this one back to Emeka. This next question I have, and that is, having been at the company for 21 years, how easy or difficult is it to move around within the company from one team to the next?
I think it used to be hard, maybe 10, 15 years ago. Now it's so much easier. Within the data group, I think Brian and I are data group at least, and Aaron as well. It's no work. You talk to the new manager and you move over. That's pretty much what it is. I like this area. I think it will be interesting, blah, 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 and you're done. Between organizations, like say office or data, or something far away, you might still have to go through an interview. But it's really different. I think once you make it into the company, it's easier to transfer from group to group. And it's mostly showing interest. I do informationals and a lot, which is I learn about something during a meeting and I will reach out to someone. What is this? What's going on there? It sounds interesting. And in the back of my mind, I'll be like, oh, maybe in 2 or 3 years, if I'm bored here, I may ping and reach out and say, is that thing still going on? How far? And I'll transfer. So.
Awesome. I think that's a great characteristic of employment at Microsoft. So I'm going to pull another question from the chat or comment / question. So I'm looking for a little bit of insight here. And maybe if this doesn't apply to you personally, maybe you know of a story of a colleague at Microsoft, because I know of actually a few of these stories where, so the question or comment is around, and it's from Paul Ugona, and that is he's come close to being hired a couple of times after going through the interview process at Microsoft, but they end up going with a different candidate. But he had encouraging feedback. So I know of at least 2 or 3 of our candidates from HBCU Connect that have interviewed several times with Microsoft before they actually landed the position, but would love some feedback from any volunteer on the panel that either personally has some experience interviewing more than once, or know of some story of someone that's interviewed quite a few times before they got hired at Microsoft.
I have a nephew who did it 4 times.
4 times.
So
4 times.
He got in on his 4th time. He interviewed for 2 different roles the first 2 times, and then the second role he interviewed twice and got it on the second.
Awesome. So I would say to the candidate that asked that question, I would say be encouraged, because if you got good feedback, like I said, we've had candidates that have come through us in the past that interviewed several times before they actually landed a position, and then we've actually had some keynote speakers that are now higher ups in the company that also interviewed, 3 or 4 times before they got in, and now they're in leadership positions there at Microsoft. So I would say be encouraged. Okay, so I'm going to pull another question. We've got about 5 minutes left. So I want to pull a good question from Evan Shields, and that is, what are some of the biggest challenges Microsoft Azure or your respective groups face from a program management perspective? And so my HU fellow, I'm looking at you for this one. So Aaron, if you want to speak to some challenges from a PM perspective.
Ooh, okay, challenges. I would say definitely, like, one of the biggest challenges that I face right now is that, I mean, I'm laughing at Emeka's comment that Microsoft is a large company. Microsoft is a large company, and so a lot of the projects that I'm working on have been cross-functional. So I've had to deal with, because I'm like, it's almost like you're dealing with another team, but it can almost feel like you're dealing with another company. Like, it's gotten much better with the one Microsoft approach, and how, we're all taking a dependency on each other. So that collaboration has gotten better. But I would say the hardest part about program management is that it's not just dealing with the people that are your coworkers. Like, I work with my actual coworkers very little. I'm mostly working with people that are nowhere in my org chart, or that are all the way in another group, to get something done, to help them realize why we need this feature in the next semester, or to get them to onboard to our new tool that we're having. And so I would say that the biggest challenge is you're going to be working, a lot cross-functional across the groups with people that are not just program managers. You're going to be working with engineering managers. You're going to be working with engineers. You might work with, the product marketing folks. You might be working with the compliance folks, which I work with a lot. And so it's just, be ready to be working with a very cross-functional group of people, and not just your coworkers. And, I always say, my managers always tell me, don't take no for an answer. So, I mean, eventually it might come down to a no, but keep pushing, and, keep going through the thing. Don't get discouraged because someone says no.
Love it. Love it. So Bruno, I want to come back to you and ask a question that I see that actually came in from the chat that I thought was an interesting question. It's from Johnson Ivana. And the question is, how often do coding mishaps happen? For example, broken code, program malfunctions. And I'm guessing probably the more interesting part, coding mishaps that actually make it through production.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I had the opportunity to be in the migration, like when I entered to the team, some migration component was happening from one version to another. And yeah, it was kind of breaking a lot. So therefore we had like a lot of, incidents, and we need to respond to those incidents. But I guess was interesting to have like these failures, because give us the opportunity to learn more about, from different perspective, the system, right? So that doesn't need to be like, like a problem itself. It's gonna happen. It's like part of every system, like to have failures, bugs that, I mean, are not completely perfect, right? But something that we are trying to do in order to handle that better is to take advantage of our analytics capability, right? The organization has encouraged like for every a software engineer to learn like all these analytical skills, right? Like using indexing systems to analyze better the logs, take advantage more of the alerting, monitoring, etc. So we can, like predict or we can like react beforehand, right? Before actually the bug and the mistakes goes to production and affects 100% of the customers. I mean, super worst case, right? Uh, so everything is a learning process, I will say. So it happens often, but the most important is to learn from those incidents. Yeah.
Love it, love it. Okay, so we've got just about a minute left. So I want to do two things in this minute. One is I want to go over next steps for our candidates, and then two, I want to give Brian, our keynote speaker, the last word as far as words of encouragement for our candidates, whatever is on your heart or in your mind, Brian, to share with our candidates. Now, as far as next steps, Jesse, feel free to correct me or add anything to what I'm getting ready to say. But the process is simple, and I'm going to make two recommendations for our candidates. One, make sure we have your latest resume, right? So I just dropped the link in the chat. I'm going to drop it again. To our website, this will take you to the landing page for the event. You can upload your latest contact information and you can upload your latest resume. I would say you've got roughly about 24 hours. So if you want to take your notes from this call, if you want to update your resume and then submit it, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share your resumes. I'm going to organize them, and then I'm going to send them to Jesse, who's on the talent acquisition team there, and he's going to share those resumes then with the Azure Data team for consumption. So that what that means is they're going to have some current openings, they're going to have some openings that come up, and they're going to be looking to see how they can align some of you with interviews for those opportunities that are current or coming down the pipe. So the other proactive thing that you can do that I recommend, and people that have come to our events have been hired this way, is just go out to the Microsoft website and apply for opportunities that you think are a fit for your skill set, especially if your skill set is outside of software engineering or program management or technical program management. Go to the Microsoft site and start to apply. If you want to specifically look for opportunities on the Azure Data team, then hashtag Azure Data or the keyword Azure Data, right, on the Microsoft site. So we'll follow up with those instructions via email. We will follow up with the recording from this event. But with that, Jesse, am I missing anything?
No, that was good, Will. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So let me hand it off for final words from our keynote speaker, Brian Jackson from Detroit, my neighbor up north. I'm in Ohio. So Brian, if you want to take us away.
Sure. So yeah, I think there were a lot of great questions. Thank you everyone for being so engaged and listening. And it's a great opportunity. I encourage you to take it. The question about imposter syndrome, it's normal for everyone to have it. I think that one thing I want to leave people with, because even I feel it, 16 years at the company, almost 20 whatever in my career. I'm not going to date myself that much, but the best way is to always be willing to learn something new. Someone asked, hey, if I get my AZ 900 certification, will it help? Learn, right? I've held almost every Azure cert at one time before they kept creating more and more and more. But the reason that you want to do that is when you learn something, you take a certification, it tells you, hey, I do know this, at least to a level, right? It's not for other people, it's for you. Someone asked questions about my nephew who interviewed 4 times. I gave him some material and was like, look at this, he got certs. He learned, he applied. The best thing you can do is invest in yourself. And these are just ways to do that. So that's what I'll leave you.
Awesome. So I'll be remiss if I forgot to get a screenshot to those of you that came like ready for an interview, with your suits on and all that good stuff. This is your chance. You want to turn on your video now? Let's get a screenshot of your smiling faces. And in the meantime, let me thank everyone to the Microsoft side, to our panelists, I want to thank you for volunteering your time to share your experience, to help motivate some of the potential candidates that are, looking at careers at Microsoft. I want to thank you, and to our candidates. Without you all showing up to these events, of course, this is not possible. So I want to thank all of our candidates for taking the time out to attend. And with that, if you want to turn on your camera, let's prepare for a screenshot. So I'm going to unhighlight everyone right quick. And if everyone wants to turn on their camera for our quick little screenshot. So this is always interesting to me, just to see, who we have on. But feel free to turn on your video, and let's go ahead and get a screenshot or two. Let's see here. All right. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. I appreciate it, everyone. So thank you all. Make sure to send over your updated resume. I'll drop that in the chat one more time, that link. And then look for an email coming from us. Whoops, I dropped the screenshot. So look for an email coming from HBCU Connect with next steps. And then we will wish you good luck. All right. So everyone take care and have a great evening. Take care.